are in luck because I have with me in studio former Cricket South Africa board member Mr. Marius Skuman, and on Zoom the chairperson of the current interim board, Justice Zaki Yacoob. And we're trying to get an update on where things are at Cricket South Africa. And of course, as you would have heard, those who were with us just before the break, that things are not exactly looking as they should at this moment. This week alone, some decisions were taken by the interim board as they try and clean up the mess that Cricket South Africa finds itself in, and that includes the suspension of the company secretary, Mr. Welsh Gwaza. Now, Mr. Skuman, I want to start off with you here. We've seen suspensions taking place this entire year. Domination has been suspensions and dismissals at Cricket South Africa, some which have been challenged at CCMA by the likes of Mr. Clive Eckstein, and now the CSA conceding, at least through the interim board, that that dismissal was not exactly as it should have taken place. The approach that has been taken by Cricket South Africa in the dismissal that they've made, is it the right kind of approach, or does this just signal more troubles that are going to take some time to resolve?
Morena, thank you for the question. I think one needs to consider if you take out in any company 3, 4, or even more of your senior executives, it leaves a vacuum, and those that are left behind, if I can use that phrase, have to then deal with the matters at hand. And if you have people that are only less than a year in their positions, it makes it even tougher. If you talk about dismissals, I think the suspension of Clive and other two gentlemen that happened by the CEO. The previous CEO took that decision to suspend them. Yes, to my knowledge, they did consult with the nomination committee on that, the HR and REMCO. The decision to suspend Mr. Moro was not just an easy decision that was taken at a whim. The challenge was it took very, very long to deal with the matter. In terms of his contract of employment, he reports to the chairman of the board. And it's the chairman of the board who has to take the action that's required. And the board had to go through a lengthy process to ensure fairness and equity. I know that there are many board members that have played an active role to make sure that there's fairness in the process. It's unfortunate that labour matters don't get resolved overnight. But if you look at the seriousness of the charges, I do think that there was fairness in the process. And it was Mr. Moro's decision on how to react to the charges that were brought against him and the time that he was given to respond to that.
Justice, it's been alleged this week as well, along with the suspension of Mr. Welsh Gwaza, that the acting chief executive, who has not even been in the position for very long, Ms. Kugandra Govender, as well as the CFO, Phuletsi Museki, have also, or rather were, served with notices of suspension. I just wanted to find out, is there any truth to that?
There's no truth in that at all. But if you ask me how possible that is, I would say that everyone is being investigated at the moment. There are many, many troubles in the organization. And it may be that some more executive reshuffling might well have to be necessary. We understand, of course, that we can't leave the organization naked. Yes. But it becomes a difficult issue when, in our view, and we may be wrong, that retaining people in the organization is not in the interests of the organization. It becomes a very interestingly difficult decision because you keep them there, the organization is prejudiced. You let them go, and the organization is prejudiced. And so it is. One can't do very much about that in any way. We have to make the judgment call. And we have made the judgment call that some executive will go. One has gone already. Yes. But we have made alternative arrangements. We are investigating temporary ways of running the organization efficiently. Because we are only an interim board, our view is that we can't make permanent arrangements now, because the permanent arrangement must be made by the permanent board when it's appointed at the AGM, which I hope will be held. So we're making those arrangements. It's not ideal because you're actually between a rock and a hard place. Yes. If you honestly come to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that certain individuals are problematic for the organization and will not enable our work, and that they should be suspended. You cannot say, I'm not going to suspend them because I have no alternative. You've got to find an alternative. And that's what we are trying to do. And our approach is that cleaning up an organization is always difficult. This is very much like state capture. Cricket has been captured by non-cricket interests. And if it carries on like this, cricket is never going to survive. So we are determined, unless we are stopped in our track by some force which we cannot control, to make sure that the matter is resolved in some way or another.
Justice, I just want to bring Mr. Schoeman back again. Apologies for interrupting you there again, because you make a very interesting point there about state capture and how, you compare it to Cricket South Africa. Is there any truth to this, Mr. Schoeman? Do you feel, as a former board member yourself and somebody who's been involved in cricket for a very long time, do you feel that at this point South African cricket is captured?
Well, I've only been involved for a short time, since September last year, so I cannot say that I know it well enough. I do find it interesting that the comparison is made to state capture. I don't believe that that's the case. Okay. I think that it's far more basic, and that one of the fundamental things that I think that is wrong with Cricket South Africa and can be easily addressed if there's the will to do that, and that's the two-tier structure. The two-tier governance structure is inherently flawed, unintentionally by design. But you have role confusion. You have people that are members' council who are also board members and also presidents of their unions, and which hat do they wear when they speak, or when they think, or when they deliberate? Yes. So the question I always asked is, so this question about state capture, why is it there? And I'm just saying, in my experience, the board of Cricket South Africa has, to an effect, been sterilized. It had the inability to action decisions that would be in the normal course of any corporation, but it's a result of the structure. And it's not necessarily intentional, yes, but you do realize after time that there may be people that unknowingly are doing it. What I found is that people were very willing to listen and appreciate. The thing that I found very, very interesting and sometimes frustrating is the board would give directive to the management, and then management just won't implement them. And why is that? And the only conclusion that I eventually could come to is because management felt that if the members' council, yes, and specifically the president and the vice president, didn't agree with that decision, then they don't know, because who do they report to? Just look at the company secretary. Yes. I don't want to be in his position, because he's the secretariat of the members' council, yes, and the secretariat of the board. Yes. And one of the recommendations that were made was actually to split it. Yes. There's been so many recommendations made. The MOI should have been amended by the end of May. And it's still not. We're still there. And one needs to understand why that's the case. And I think that the interim board and Justice and his team needs to be given the space, and they need to get the right people to help them, yes, to be deliberate and courageous enough to make those changes that are required. And to talk about state capture, I don't think so. Yes, there may be people that want to influence and impose themselves on this, but there's no capturing as such. Right, I think people were looking at a smoking gun in the forensic report. It's not there.
We're going to leave it just there for now. Of course, this is Mr. Marius Schoeman, who is a former board member of Cricket South Africa, and of course we are still joined by Justice Zak Yacoob, who himself has just been giving us, their intentions as the board and what they're trying to do in the very short space of time that they're given to change things around in Cricket South Africa. The two gentlemen are still going to be with me as we draw closer to the end of Inside Sport. Do stay with us.